Welcome to Talk Learning with me. I'm Joseph Diaz, an instructional designer passionate about connecting with others and exploring the field of learning and development. In this podcast, we dive into topics like education, learning science, facilitation, behavior change, and other skills related to personal and professional growth. If you're looking to connect with other lifelong learners and discover new insights from talented learning professionals, this show is for you. Today, I'm joined by Alex Bingham, a training lead at Concept Plus, where he oversees a team of trainers supporting government software integration projects. Alex holds a master's degree in instructional technology and learning sciences, an MBA, and he's completing his PhD in organizational learning and focusing on aligning learning strategy with business goals. He also serves as president of the Utah ATD chapter, where he fosters professional growth and networking for L&D professionals. In this episode, we'll discuss learning strategy, bridging research and practice, and practical steps for engaging with research. Plus, Alex shares some must-know resources, books, and podcasts that you don't want to miss. Without further ado, let's talk learning strategy. Welcome, Alex, to Talk Learning with me. Thank you so much for being here. How's your day been so far?
It's been good, productive, and I'm excited to be here and talk about L&D and learning strategy and everything related to that.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It's especially coming off of the holiday. Having this on my calendar was something that I looked forward to. I think coming off of Christmas and New Year's and maybe binging, eating a little too much food, too much treats. We made Christmas fudge. I think getting to jump into learning and leadership and this topic with you is going to be the perfect way to kind of get my gears turning again and get back into 2025. So super excited to have this conversation with you, Alex. And before we get started, I want to give you a chance to give a little bit of an introduction. Could you share a little bit about your background, what led to you focusing on learning strategy and leadership in your career?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah, and that was in health promotion. And during that time, I knew whatever I wanted to do in life. I wanted to try and become the best I could, an expert. And so around that time, beginning of my undergrad years, I had decided one day I'd love to get my PhD, and I didn't know really beyond that, but I was focused on health and wellness, and that was kind of the path I had chosen for myself, and I really enjoyed it. And I focused on stress management specifically. And then I graduated, or I guess my last semester of my undergrad, my wife and I had a kid, and we also took in 3 foster kids unexpectedly.
Wow.
And so there was this moment where I was like, okay, my plan was to move away from Utah, most likely, go into a master's program in something related to health and wellness and go that route. And then I was like, well, I probably need to put school on hold for a minute and work full time to support all these kids and my wife and myself. And so I had done door-to-door sales, had experience in sales, and it pays well. And so I was like, well, let's just pursue that. And so I was fortunate enough to get a job as a sales rep for a dental company called Dentsply Sirona. And I really enjoyed sales, a lot of aspects of sales, and then there's a lot that I didn't enjoy. And actually during my onboarding is when I started to think more seriously about pursuing learning as a career. And during my onboarding, I just was like, well, there has to be a better way to onboard employees and educate them and train them. And I'm a huge fan of learning, always have been a lifelong learner. And so it was during that time, I was like, well, I think I would like this. And so I started looking more into it. And then I think it was 4 months later or something, I was enrolled in Utah State's program for instructional technology and learning sciences, and decided I was going to make that my career. So I was working as a sales rep, going to school for instructional design. It was a unique situation for sure. And then when I graduated from Utah State with my degree, it was kind of another moment where I was like, well, do I keep going in sales even though it's not my favorite, but it pays well? Or do I pursue my passion? And So I took a pay cut to pursue my passion and instructional design and L&D, and I got my first full-time L&D. Like I was still doing sales training stuff, trying to incorporate as much L&D stuff as I could as a sales rep. And then I got my first full-time L&D job with Maverick, a convenience store based out of Utah. And I was an instructional designer with them for about 2 years. And then I just recently moved over to a company called Concept Plus, where I'm a training lead. So I help oversee a small team of trainers. And it's interesting because it's a contract with the government. And so they brought my whole team, at least in Ogden, is essentially brand new. Like we all came on around the same time. And like you alluded to in our conversation earlier before we started recording, but it takes a long time to get clearance. And so
Yeah.
I've been waiting for that, trying to stay busy with as much as I can, and like the materials that we have at Concept Plus. And so I've just kind of been staying busy with that stuff, waiting for my clearance. So essentially what we'll be doing is helping train government employees with the software integration that they're doing.
Yeah, that's really cool. And something that stood out to me across all of those years of experience and balancing family and your academic pursuits, I love that you said when you want to do something, you want to do it well. And it's been really cool as we've talked other times as well, and just listening to you share that experience. That's something that is really apparent, is that when you do something, you do want to do it well. And I could see why that would lead you from doing sales to getting into this world of training, because I think a lot of people experience that you started a job and think that was a rough onboarding experience. It took me a really long time to get up to speed and to really feel like I was being productive in my work. So I love that as someone who wants to do well in everything, that was something you were able to acknowledge and say, I could make experiences for other people so that they get up to speed, so that they can be productive in a more efficient manner, so that they can feel like they're understanding their responsibilities in a company. So that really resonated a lot with me, because I know I've felt that same way, that it's hard getting into a new organization and feeling like, man, is it going to be months before I'm able to make a contribution to this team? I would really love to get up to speed. So I love how you went from your sales job, which as lucrative as it could have been, the potential to really feel fulfilled and helping other people learn. It sounds like that pushed you to training. Is that right?
Yeah. And it's funny because it's not like my first organization that I worked for, the one where I kind of had that epiphany. It's not like the training was necessarily bad. It's just like basically any organization where you come on and you're like, oh yeah, this could be improved. But it was more just like that realization, like, oh my gosh, like there's a need for this. Like there's opportunities, I think. And I had just never really thought about it as a career. Like everyone knows training's a career. But then like the more I looked into it, I was like, oh, there's this whole world of L&D. It's not just training. Like there's design and strategy and so many different avenues you can pursue. And so that was an exciting moment for me for sure. But just that realization that there's an opportunity to help employees. And I'm sure you gathered this too from what I was saying, but like I really value my career. I'm the type of person where I don't just want it to be a job. Like I really, truly want to be passionate about what I'm doing and love what I'm doing. And I think I found that in L&D, but as part of that, like I want to help other people in their careers, whatever it is, like find passion and joy and excitement and not only their current roles, but also their future roles and future endeavors and whatever they want to pursue.
Yeah. And you said it beautifully when you mentioned that it's not necessarily that your onboarding experience was bad, but there certainly always is room for improvement. Because I think about a project I'm doing right now in my work at Vivint, is we're working in a similar realm on our new hire training. And over the last couple of years, a lot has changed and things have gotten better, but there is always room for improvement. So I love that you mentioned, as a lifelong learner, that's something that can be really fulfilling too, is saying, this is pretty good, this onboarding experience or these learning resources, but there's an opportunity to make things even better. There's always room to get some additional improvements out. And I love your focus on helping other people too, because that's something that also really energizes me, is when I see the work I'm doing day to day actually make somebody else's life easier, more fulfilling, more rewarding. And so I really resonate a lot with that. And you mentioned that in your current role with government clearance, that's definitely kind of a process of just making sure you have the accesses that you need and things like that. but I'd love to understand maybe a little bit more. What are the typical things that you're going to be responsible for? And kind of how do you balance your strategic planning with getting to be hands-on in your day-to-day work?
Yeah. So in this current role, it's a little different because, like I said, we all came on together. So I'll help oversee a team of trainers. I'll help train, but we're training government employees with strategy integration and things like that. And so we don't make the training materials. We only train on them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it's a little different that way. Other than that, I'm not sure right yet. I'm still trying to learn the new role as well. And especially like as I wait for that clearance to come through. So I'm still trying to learn what my role entails. And then same with the strategy, that strategy component that you asked as well, like still trying to kind of figure out what that will look like exactly. So to
Yeah.
be determined, I think, but I'm excited. It's been good so far. And I love the people I'm working with, my team. They're all amazing people. So
Yeah, that sounds like a really fun challenge, getting to learn alongside your team members that you all kind of got brought on together, and you're kind of thrown into the deep end, and let's figure this out together as a team. Let's figure out how we're going to make this work and really create learning experiences that drive a difference for the company. So I really love that. And so you've talked about how learning strategy is really something that in all of your jobs has really driven you to be a high performer and someone that's constantly looking to grow and to improve. And so I'm just curious, how would you define learning strategy in the context of leadership or just in your work? What has been the meaning of that learning strategy for you?
So for me, and this is, I guess, I don't think I mentioned this either, there's a little bit of background. I'm finishing up a PhD as well in adult learning or organizational learning and leadership. And I've been focusing on learning strategy. And so this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, researching. And I guess my simple version of what a learning strategy is the plan, the vision that an organization has set or established to help educate, develop their employees, help them learn, help them grow, both in current roles and in future roles. That's, I guess, my simple version. And then the way it comes about, who oversees it, that's kind of a different story depending on each organization. Typically, it's the highest L&D leader in an organization, so a learning executive. For smaller organizations, it might be like someone over HR operations. Some organizations might not even have like an official learning strategy. They're just kind of doing whatever in the Wild West, or just training could look differently for each organization.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that was a great reminder that you are actually studying this right now as you're working towards your PhD. That reminds me how I came across your content on LinkedIn. I imagine you're doing a lot of reading on learning strategy, a lot of research. And so I had seen some of your posts of like L&D quotes of the day that you had shared some of the content that you had come across in your studies. And it was something that really added to my feed because it was just really insightful to see some of the things you're reading about learning strategy and then seeing your reflections of, well, what does this mean for me? How do we apply this? Why does it matter? And I've loved the way that you've taken some of the research and really bridged it to practice, to everyday work, because I think that's something that I'm personally trying to work on as well, because there's so much ongoing research all the time. And sometimes we get so caught up in our day-to-day work that maybe we forget to apply that research. And I'd love to understand, Alex, what role does research play in shaping effective learning strategies as you kind of been working on your PhD, going through the literature? What have you seen as the role of that research in shaping an effective learning strategy?
I think it's important, and I don't think it's incorporated enough. And I guess it comes from both sides, like the academic side and the professional side. I think there's room for both to kind of meet in the middle, because based on like my research and I guess I have a unique perspective as well, being a professional, but also pursuing a PhD, because I'm still in the academic world, but working full time as a professional. And so I get that unique perspective, but essentially there's just not a lot of the L&D research isn't being consumed by practitioners, which is, when you think about it, oftentimes who the research is for, right? To improve practice. Like there's no point in pursuing research on these topics if the people that they're meant for it aren't using it or engaging with it or incorporating
Right.
it. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Like one is it can be hard to access because our practitioners just don't typically have access to like journal articles.
Mhm.
Two is like maybe jargon or just they're not familiar with terms or research in general, how to read it, analyze it, implement it. And then a lot of times it's just not applicable. Like what researchers think is useful for practitioners isn't really useful, or what they're caring about or focusing on. And then that kind of goes both ways too, because I think a lot of times what practitioners are interested and focused on, they could learn from research, right? Like stuff they're not thinking about that's happening in research that they could be applying. But yeah, there's a huge opportunity for researchers to focus more on what practitioners care about and are learning about and trying to implement, and then also practitioners to learn about what's new in the field and research and what they can apply.
Yeah, and I love your optimism talking about it in this really collaborative effort of we both need to come together. I think it can be really easy to fall into a mentality of us versus them, of practitioners thinking you researchers don't understand what my work is like, and researchers just thinking you practitioners don't care about the important research that we're doing. And so I love that emphasis you put on we need to come together and work together because we ultimately do have the same goal. Researchers finding what is most effective and proving it consistently so that practitioners can improve their work without having to just struggle and learn the hard way. I think we can learn from the mistakes of others, learn from the mistakes that researchers make as they're trying to find better ways to learn, better ways to create effective training experiences and resources. And something you said that really resonated too is sometimes it's the access to the research that maybe isolates us as practitioners. And then you also mentioned jargon. And that's something that I've seen in my work too, that as I came out of my master's program, I had all of these frameworks, models, and theories in my head. And I would listen to my coworkers talk, and it almost seemed like they knew what I was studying in my master's program without having studied it, but they just used much more casual language. Where I had been talking in class weeks prior about cognitive load, my manager would look at training content and just say, man, that looks really overwhelming. And I was thinking, oh man, I'd get really excited. We talked about this in class. We've got to consider the cognitive load of our learners. And without having any technical background or research, my manager could also just intuitively look at something and say, I think we need to simplify this process. So I love the collaborative effort that you talked about of can we as practitioners lean into some of the research, maybe take some time to try and understand the jargon, speak the same language as our researchers. And then also from the other side too, researchers can try and demystify or simplify some of the complex jargon and lingo that's in their research papers and say, how can I put this in terms of what practitioners are seeing and doing every day in their work so they can take my findings and actually apply them every day? Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Yeah, yeah. And it was interesting too. Like I think a lot of it too is just being willing as practitioners to engage in research, for example, from the side of actually being a participant in someone's research.
Huh.
I found it kind of difficult to even find willing participants. And granted, I know I was trying to interview learning executives, so I know they're extremely busy. But yeah, just trying to even give back to our field in that way. Like if you ever approached or have the opportunity to complete a survey or an interview or something for research, like think about it, consider it, be willing to get involved that way and give back to the field through an academic lens. Because there's so many ways that we can build up this field, and I think that's just one of them. And then there's other ways too to get involved. Like there's academic research, but then there's also other forms of or sources that we can engage with. It's just like really trying to go outside of our little box or our little bubble and like see what other resources are out there, compare them against each other, like what surveys are out there. Do you feel like they're meaningful or apply to you? Just trying to think. I guess a simple way to put it is it's about trying to think more critically about what we're doing and not just like accepting everything as truth or just staying with what we're comfortable with, but it's making concerted efforts to go outside of what we're familiar with to expand our thinking when it comes to L&D and like L&D practices and how we can implement those, because that's really how our field grows, right? Like
Right.
it's being uncomfortable and trying to find new resources and new ways to do things.
Yeah, I think as practitioners, when work is busy, it's easy to keep your head down and just want to plow through with the work that is currently on your plate. And I think something that you mentioned is it's going to take some extra effort, whether that be engaging in small ways through surveys, giving feedback, participating in research. We can't just expect researchers to make their research more relevant if we're not going to engage with it anyway. So I love that proactive approach that you mentioned too, is, well, as a practitioner, are there ways that I can get involved? Are there people in my network that are maybe researching the same challenges that I'm facing in my work today? Can I collaborate with them and share my insights from the practitioner side? And then researchers can have that access to practitioners that they need. And it sounds like your PhD program has really been a catalyst for bridging that gap for you, that you've been on both sides at the same time of, okay, I'm a practitioner, but I'm also working on my PhD and I need access to more practitioners beyond myself. I can't work with a sample of one and say this is my research. And so I was curious, Alex, have there been any moments or projects that really stand out to you that have kind of become that turning point in your approach to collaborating between practitioners and researchers to improve learning strategy?
Yeah, they're different worlds for sure. And I granted, I haven't spent a whole lot of time like fully investigating like that academic side because I'm a practitioner. I still lean more towards that area, I guess. But like one way, so maybe ask me in about a month or two, but like I'm presenting a paper, so I'll take a smaller version of my dissertation, same research. I'm presenting it at, it's called the Academy of Human Resource Development Conference, which will be next month. And that it's called AAHRD is what the acronym is. It's primarily scholars, like L&D scholars, but they also welcome practitioners. And so that'll be a hopefully good opportunity to get my feet wet in sort of the academic side as a practitioner, but presenting on a scholarly paper. But yeah, just trying to, I guess, get more academics perspectives and feedbacks at that conference. So, but other than that, yeah, like I don't have a whole lot of experience. I'm still growing in that area, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you've got my gears turning. I'm thinking about, if I wanted to be more connected with research, I'm thinking about my own faculty and students, alumni from my master's program, and thinking, how could I work with them in the research that they're doing and be involved with maybe some of the conferences. So you talked about this. It was AHRD conference that you're doing.
Academy of Human Resource Development.
Academy of Human Resource Development. So kind of looking at these conferences and opportunities for practitioners and researchers to come together. And I know that some people in learning and development maybe don't have the educational background of getting a master's or a doctorate's degree in instructional sciences or instructional technology. So if somebody didn't have that background, maybe they just fallen into the field through experience or just accidentally found themselves working in an instructional design role, but they wanted to get involved with integrating more research and being more involved in bridging that gap between practice and research. What would you recommend they do? I know you've talked about taking the time to get involved and participate in studies, but if someone was really new to this and just thought, how can I get more involved in the research? Are there any recommendations you would give them to get started?
Yeah, definitely. So one was what I mentioned earlier, like it doesn't necessarily have to be academic papers, like although I think those are helpful, they can be hard to access, but like, a lot of it is just like practicing critical thinking. So like trying to be more intentional about looking at different websites and resources and associations and podcasts, like whatever, like just try and consume more content, compare it against each other. Like, what do you like? What don't you like? Why don't you like it? Why do you like it? What could you apply in your work? How would you apply it? Just those types of thought processes, and then continuing those actions, like just building a habit of researching and thinking critically. But then like on the academic side, Google Scholar, a lot of them you have to have access like through a university or you have to pay for them, but they also have some free ones that you can access. So just try Google Scholar, typing in keywords or terms that you're interested in. That's a good way to do it. The AHRD, so if you're just like interested in general L&D research, so that may or may not be specific to like instructional design or training, you could join them, and they do support professionals or practitioners, although they are more scholarly focused, but that's a way to do it for sure. And then I think like in my experience, just reaching out to even like professors, they're usually pretty friendly and like excited about the work they're doing. So like if there's a paper you're interested in, but you can't access it, but you really want to see it, don't hesitate to reach out to a professor. They may say no, but I think a lot of times they're just happy. I think someone wants to read their work and are interested in what they're doing. So that's an
That's
option
cool.
too.
Yeah, I really love that solution. The most recent that you talked about is maybe there's a research article behind a paywall, but are there other ways you can access the author? Can you connect with them on LinkedIn, send them a message? Maybe they have a blog where some of their writing is publicly available that's not as academic, but it's still the work that they're doing. And then Google Scholar, I'm thinking right now, as soon as we finish recording, I'm going to have to go straight to Google Scholar and do a little bit of research and see what I can get my hands on. And I'm curious, Alex, when you go to Google Scholar, are there any keywords in particular that you find lead to some really interesting research? Is it learning strategy, or what do you find yourself searching up to get relevant and insightful journal articles?
Yeah, that goes back to that jargon. Like it was a journey trying to find relevant articles. So essentially the academic side calls L&D HRD, Human Resource Development. So I just mentioned that earlier with the Academy of Human Resource Development. So HRD, that's like their version of L&D. I'm not certain like why we call it different things, but we do, like, and that's part of that disconnect between like the scholarly side and the practitioner side. But a lot of times they call it HRD or Human Resource Development. So that's a good keyword if you're looking for that. And then, yeah, a lot of it was just like HRD strategy alignment. And then like there'd be some good articles or like L&D strategy alignment, chief learning officer, and things like that. And that's kind of like my area of expertise. So that's what I focused on. But I'm sure if you typed in like instructional design or like specific types of trainings that you're interested in, or just the word training, you'll get a plethora of things, or like measurement and evaluation with L&D or HRD. That was a good one too. So a lot of it, again, is just like spending time kind of playing around with it and seeing what works for you and what you're interested in.
Yeah, that's a really helpful starting point, especially for me. I hadn't thought about, are we translating the jargon correctly? And so if I'm only searching for papers that talk about L&D, I'm going to miss out on all of these other research papers that are categorized under this bucket of HRD. And something that I heard was you kind of talked about searching by maybe role, title, or even responsibility. So if I'm really interested in e-learning, I could search for research in HRD or L&D focused on e-learning. Or maybe right now I'm finding myself personally doing a lot of virtual instructor-led training. And so maybe I'm looking at remote learning and virtual training and things like that. So maybe searching some of those terms and seeing what's the latest research in 2025 related to the type of work I'm doing every single day, and then giving it a read, reaching out to some of those practitioners and saying, hey, I love the research you're doing on this. This is what I do every single day for work. I love to learn with you. And can I contribute? Can I give back to your research? Are there any insights or ways I can participate and give back to you?
Yeah. And one of the things I love about like trying to get more involved in strategy and like my experience in doing this research is like I've mentioned this too, like looking at non-academic or non-scholarly articles is also a great practice. And what I found is like their experiences, these articles that are being written by like practitioners and things like that, like they really are valuable, and they're sharing about like their experiences and what they've learned and what they know. And that's what makes them so valuable. But what I love about like the academic research as well is it's taking like that one person's experience, for example, and they're also comparing it against like 10 others or 100 others or whatever, however many it might be. And so you really get to see like, oh, does this compare to what they're doing? And then it's done through an empirical lens, or like looking at it critically and not just accepting it for like the data for what it is, but really trying to say, okay, here's this data. Now, is it meaningful? Is it meaningful in general? Is it meaningful to like specific populations or what I'm trying to find? And so they just are a lot more thoughtful in that approach. And so you get to, like I said, another perspective, and you can then compare it to what you're interested in or what you're trying to accomplish or look at. So it's just another perspective, but I think it's an important one because of the amount of effort and research that goes behind the academic side.
Yeah. And I love how you talked about leveraging the other side's area of expertise, because maybe as a practitioner, we're not as skilled or practiced at being so empirical, being so methodical, making sure we have the right sample size, making sure we're doing the statistics to see, is this a statistically significant change or improvement, or is this just what I'm observing in my one-off experience? And there are other factors that I'm not taking into consideration. So I love that we can lean into the other side's strengths and let that help us out. And then same goes for the research side, that maybe we've done things very isolated, but then we want to see in the Wild West where our practitioners are doing this in a much less controlled environment and with less resources and support, what is the result and how can we bridge that gap? And you talked about, we've got scholarly articles, we've got journals, and then there are other resources. Are there any books, podcasts, or articles that you'd recommend that maybe you found insightful lately, something that's really caught your attention that you would recommend people check out right now?
Yeah, so I put together like a list for that specific reason. So I can send that to you and then you can disseminate it. But like I just love, I'm sure you can tell by now, like I just love engaging in like resources and like discovering new podcasts, new books, new articles, new things, and like trying to help others do the same, because there's so much out there. And like the more I research, the more I dig into it, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just so much that like opportunities to engage in whatever you're interested in. So I put together like a few books, podcasts, articles, and things like that, like on learning strategy, because that's kind of what our conversation is around. That's what I'm interested in. So I can send that to you and you can disseminate it.
That's amazing. Thank you. And maybe you can give a little bit of a sneak peek of some of those resources. I'll make sure to put the whole list in the show notes, but are there any notable mentions that you might want to call out, or maybe some of Alex's favorites that you found yourself giving special love to, or podcasts that you've been really picking up when you're on your drive or when you're doing your errands or chores or things like that?
Yeah. So Strategic Learning Alignment, that's a book by Rita Smith. So I helped use this book when I was doing my own research. And this is going back to our previous conversation, like that's one person's experience, I guess, on what a learning strategy alignment looks like. And I was able to use that, and she has like a framework that she puts out, and I was able to look at that framework and then kind of compare it to because I also came up with a framework based on my research. And so I think that's why it's so important just to look at everything, because there's so many different things out there, and being able to use them, compare them, and either create something new that makes sense for you or based off your research or whatever it might be. But so that book is great. And then Leading the Learning Function is really good. So this is one that ATD put out. There's a bunch of different authors. So there's 2 editors that put it together, and then there's each chapter is like different authors. That one's really great. Talks about learning strategy as well as just leading the learning function in general and what it takes to lead a learning function. And as someone interested in that area, I think that book is fantastic. Articles, there's one by McKinsey, and it's called The Essential Components of a Successful L&D Strategy. So this one is really, really great. I love it. I feel like I quoted it a lot in my research. So I'll send that one over to you. That one's great. And then certifications even. I don't have this one, but I thought it was interesting. There's a certified learning strategist, or you can become a certified learning strategist through Brandon
No
Hall
way.
group. It looked interesting. I looked into it for a while, but I was like, I should probably finish my PhD before I like start diving into other stuff. So
Right.
but yeah, that one looks interesting to me. I think that one's pretty cool. And then podcasts, I like the Strategic L&D podcast. They haven't put out anything new for a while, so I think I don't know if they're on hold or done, but they put out some good content, and so that's one I enjoy listening to.
That's fantastic. And I love that you've got this diverse range of media forms, because sometimes a podcast is perfect for on the go. So the strategic learning podcast.
Yeah, the Strategic L&D podcast.
The Strategic L&D podcast. I think that's a great one that I could throw on my drive, my commute to work, or maybe while I'm at the gym getting some exercise in. But then some of those books you mentioned are also good for maybe a lunch break or as I'm unwinding before bed, just kind of keep the thoughts coming in, getting exposure to new ideas about leading strategic teams and being more intentional in my strategic learning. And then you mentioned too, so you're doing your PhD, trying to finish that up before you do any certifications or further degrees and things like that. So if people wanted to connect with you, read some of your research, check out the frameworks that you're creating, where can people connect with you and see your work?
LinkedIn, that's the best one. Maybe one day I'll get on these other ones, X and Blue Sky, and who knows? I don't know. But right now I'm just on LinkedIn. So just follow me on LinkedIn, Alex Bingham. You can look me up. I'm trying to get more active on LinkedIn, which is kind of, you mentioned the L&D quote of the day. There was a couple reasons I wanted to do that, but one was just to try and be more active on LinkedIn, and to start conversations around L&D topics and things like that. And so, follow me on LinkedIn, and hopefully in the next few months, I'll start to put out like my research that I've done. Once it gets approved and things like that, I go through the proper channels. I'll hopefully be able to put that out, and those who are interested can read into that and look at the framework I've built around how to actually develop an L&D strategy and align it with the business. So
that's exciting. I can't wait to see the research that you've got coming down the pipeline. I love seeing your content on LinkedIn. I feel the same way, that it's just a lot of fun to start conversations with people, to put some thoughts out there and see what do other practitioners think, what do researchers think. LinkedIn is really a great place to start bridging that gap, like you talked about, maybe where you can connect with people who are interested in the same field of work, who are trying to improve and trying to learn. And then, Alex, you're also really involved with the Association for Talent Development. Would you make any recommendations or have any call outs there as well as the current president?
Absolutely. So I'm the president of the Utah chapter, and there's chapters all throughout the US. I don't know if there's any outside of the US. I'm sure maybe, but yeah, just you get involved with your local chapter if you have one. It's been an amazing experience for me just to network with like-minded professionals that I can see face to face in person. And I've built a lot of really, really great relationships with L&D folks through ATD, specifically like the chapters. But if that doesn't vibe with you, like there's so many others too, like opportunities to join communities, L&D communities and associations and things like that. So just keep searching, find your people, find one that works for you. And I just think it's important to network, even if you're like, I consider myself an introvert, more shy, but like I still love to talk L&D and meet with these like-minded professionals. So just, making that effort, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Would highly recommend checking out, like you said, ATD, or even just other communities of learning, communities of practice, to meet people, to network. And like you said, even if you're introverted, I think they're really great opportunities to connect with people, to learn. And I really appreciate all of the insights you've shared and resources you've mentioned, like using LinkedIn as a place to find people to talk with, start discussions, find research to indulge in and really put into practice. Because coming into this conversation, I felt like I'm a couple of years removed from my master's program. I'm not really sure what I can do to bridge that gap between research and practice. And do I have to go back to school if I want to get involved in that world? And so I really love how accessible you've made bridging strategic L&D from researchers and practitioners for me, and hopefully for those who are listening. So I just want to say thank you so much, Alex, for all of the insights you've shared from your journey, your experience, and I can't wait to see the work that you do moving forward. It's going to be so exciting.
Yeah, thanks. I want to clarify too, like I love learning, and like for me, getting degrees, it's just like, that's more of a personal thing. Like I just enjoy that aspect of learning and like pursuing that, but by no means do you have to like pursue degrees to enter this field, be successful in this field, like continue to learn and do research. That's just one way to do it for sure. But there's so many different ways to get involved. And so I just want to clarify that, like it's not just degrees. That's not the only way. Like there's so many different ways. It's just about finding what works for you and like making efforts to engage and be active and be involved. I think that's the key more than anything else.
Yeah, I love that. And I will definitely make sure that I find what works for me. And I hope that those listening in can feel that same encouragement too, whether it's pursuing a certification, pursuing a degree, or even just finding a podcast that they love to listen to that connects them to the world of research and helps them in their strategic thinking and their strategic development. I think that's going to be a real game changer to make those small improvements and just be a little bit more connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Joseph. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the time, Alex. Really appreciate it.
You too.
That wraps up today's conversation with Alex Bingham. I loved hearing his perspective on learning strategy, the importance of bridging research with practice, and his actionable ways that we can all grow our strategic approach to learning and development. If you want to keep learning from Alex, be sure to follow him on LinkedIn, where he shares valuable insights and resources regularly. I'll also include Alex's list of recommended books, podcasts, and articles in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with a friend or coworker. Your support helps others discover these conversations and keeps the learning going. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, keep learning, and we'll talk soon.